Hello, and welcome to this instruction video for Microsoft Dynamics NAV. This video's topic is closing the income statement in Microsoft Dynamics NAV 2016. My name is Teunis Motterman, and this video is presented to you by DSA Global Solutions. In this demo, I will be using a 2016 W1 database, but the procedures used apply to all Microsoft Dynamics NAV versions, including even the earliest DOS versions. The functionality demonstrated also works for all localized country versions, so I'm sure that you can apply what you will learn on the version that you are working with, also when it is an older Microsoft Dynamics NAV version. In this video, you will learn more about the concept of closing a fiscal year in Microsoft Dynamics NAV, which 3 steps you have to take in order to close a fiscal year, how to check if all that you have done is okay, and finally, how you should deal with issues that could appear and how you can prevent them. First, let's talk about the concept of closing a fiscal year in Microsoft Dynamics NAV. The purpose of closing a fiscal year is to transfer a fiscal year's result to a retained earnings account on the balance sheet. You do so by creating corrective entries which bring the total balance for a fiscal year to zero for every single account on the income statement. These entries will have to be created in between the year that you are closing and the next fiscal year. For this purpose, Microsoft Dynamics NAV has the concept of a closing date, as opposed to a normal date. The closing date for a fiscal year is a fictitious date between the last date of the old fiscal year and the first day of the new fiscal year. In Microsoft Dynamics NAV, it is possible to calculate the balance for every single GL account, both including or excluding the year closing entries. If you include them, after having closed the fiscal year, the balance of every account on the income statement should be zero. If you exclude them, the balance of every account should represent that fiscal year's result. There is an easy-to-use batch job that processes every account on the income statement and will cancel out their respective balances. The year closing entries will be placed in a general journal. You can verify the result and post it. Since the batch job that calculates the balance of every account of the income statement includes the previously posted closing entries, you can run the batch job multiple times, in fact as often as you want, even for previous fiscal years. After having posted the lines in the journal that you had selected, new closing entries will have been created for each income statement so that the balance becomes zero. Now let's view all this in Microsoft Dynamics NAV. For this demo, I have created a special fiscal year closing button on the navigation pane that includes all the options that we will be needing, but you can use the search option to find them in your database. You basically need access to the accounting periods, to the chart of accounts, and to the general journals. The first step that you have to take is to close the fiscal year. You can do that in the accounting periods window. Here you choose the option Close Year. Please notice that you cannot close a fiscal year before you create a new one. Also notice that when a fiscal year has been closed, you can no longer change the starting date of the following fiscal year. By the way, even though a fiscal year has been closed, you can still post to it. When you do this, the entries created afterwards will be marked as posted to a closed fiscal year. And for this purpose, on the entries, the prior year entry field will be selected. You can therefore always identify which entries have been created after having closed the fiscal year. If more than one fiscal year is still open, Microsoft Dynamics NAV assumes that it is the earliest one that you want to close. A message, as you can see right here, displays the year that will close and will warn you about the consequences of closing the year. Now let's close it. The result of the first step is that the fields closed and date locked have been checkmarked. A fiscal year that is closed cannot be opened again, and you can also not remove the checkmark from the fields closed or date locked. Posting to a date in a period that is closed is however not restricted in any way. As just mentioned, you can only restrict posting to specific dates in the General Ledger Setup window or the User Setup window. The second step is to run the batch job Close Income Statement. You can find this batch job in the Financial section under Periodic Activities, but also on the Chart of Accounts. The batch job will only generate lines in a journal, but please notice that if you are using an additional reporting currency, the journal lines will not only be generated, but also immediately be posted. The batch job has the following options. In the fiscal year ending date, you must enter the last date in the fiscal year that you are closing. Automatically, the last day of the last closed year is suggested, but you could change it into the ending day of a previous fiscal year if that is required. In the General Journal Template and Batch fields, you must enter the names of the journal template and batch that the entries you are placed in. For this video, I have created the General Journal Template and a batch, both with the name Fiscal Year Closing. After having filled in the General Journal Template and Batch fields, the batch job automatically fills in the field Document Number with the next available number from the number series that has been set up for the batch. But you can also fill in this field manually if that is allowed. In the Retained Earnings Account field, you must enter the account to which the sum of all income statements is posted to. This account is typically a balance account. In our example, we will use the retained earnings account that has been set up in the demo company, which is 3120. In the posting description, you can enter the text that will accompany the entries once they are posted. The default text is Close Income Statement. The last two options, Close by Business Unit Code and Close by Dimensions, are irrelevant to most companies. It is, however, possible to indicate that the balance for every account on the income statement is not calculated as a sum of all ledger entries posted in that fiscal year, but as a sum per business unit code or per combination of selected dimensions. If you want to close by dimensions, push the Assist button and select the dimensions which you want to use for calculating the closing amount. If you select two or more dimensions, for every single combination of those dimension values, an entry will be created in the General Journal. Please make sure before you push the OK button that the General Journal that you have selected contains no lines. If you have verified that, you can push the OK button to generate the lines. Once the lines have been generated, you will be notified by a confirmation message. You can now open the journal that you have specified and review and post its lines. Please notice that the posting date for all lines is the closing date of the fiscal year. As a last line in the journal, you will find a line for the retained earnings account. Also for this line, a closing date is used, since otherwise the lines in the journal would not be in balance. Please notice the balance field in the lower right corner, which tells you that the total balance for all lines is 0, as it should be. The Close Income Statement batch can be used several times. You can post in a previous fiscal year, even after the income statement accounts have been closed. After having posted new entries in a fiscal year that had already been closed, you will have to run the batch job again. Now let's post those lines. After they have been posted, you can use the GL Balance by Dimension page to check the result. You can find this page on the Chart of Accounts. On this page, you should select GL Account as lines, Period as columns. You should select on the View By option the option Year, and Net Change as the View As option. Also select the option Include Closing Entries to show the fiscal year's result, including the closing entries. Now you can open or show the metrics. In this demo version of NAV, an account with the number 9999 has been set up, which summarizes all accounts on the income statement. The balance of this account for the fiscal year that you have closed should now be 0. Of course, this should not only be the case for this account, but in fact for every single income statement account. If you select the option to exclude the closing entries, as we will do right now, you will get the result of the fiscal year that you have selected. In fact, it is €49,425.48. You can also check the balance of the retained earnings account. If we include the closing entries for this account, it should show you exactly the same amount. That is about all there is to tell about closing a fiscal year. It's as simple as that. There can be, however, two issues that can happen that can complicate the process a little. The first issue is when entries have been posted to older fiscal years that had already been closed. In that case, the balance will not be 0 if you check the amount when including the closing entries. You must rerun the batch. I have prepared in a special journal some entries which I can now post for 2015. If I post them, and go back to the GL balance by dimension screen, you will see that now again we will have a result in 2015. All you have to do right now is to run the batch job close income statement again, in this case for 2015. For the rest we will be using the same settings. If you push OK, it will again generate some lines in our general journal. In this case for 2015, we can post them, and after that we can check the result. As you can see, 2015 is now closed once more. The second issue that can happen is when you change the settings of a dimension. For example, for account 8810, let's say that we change the value posting for the dimension department code to code mandatory. However, if we check the entries that you had already posted to this account, you will see that also ledger entries exist that have been posted without a dimension code. If we now would run the batch job, it will generate just one line for closing the fiscal year 2016. That entry will not include a department code, which means that you cannot post it. In that case, what you have to do is temporarily disable the value posting mandatory field so that you can post it. We recommend that you do this at the moment that you change the settings, because it is easier to do that at that moment than to have to do it for a lot of accounts at the moment of the fiscal year closing. That's all there is to tell about closing a fiscal year on the income statement. Please bear in mind that it's only 3 simple steps. The first step is close the fiscal year, run the batch job, close income statement, and the third step is post the lines that have been generated in the general journal that you had selected. Thank you for watching.